Paul has had some issues with the Federal Reserve. Not surprisingly, Paul has his own choice for the next chair of the Fed. It isn't Janet Yellen. His pick is, well, we'll let him tell you. Former Congressman Ron Paul joins us this morning to talk about the Federal Reserve. Congressman, good to have you back. Good morning.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
All right, so all these names out there, Cohn, Ferguson, Geithner, Summers, who would you take?
Well, I picked Noda, none of the above, because I don't think it makes any difference. They all endorse the principle of manipulating interest rate and believing that they can decide how much money supply there should be and when to raise rates and when to lower it. And you can't expect anything new or different than that. So one individual might manage things slightly differently, but overall it'll be the same thing. It's still the monetary system that we have to deal with, not the particular manager that's going to be involved.
Right. Obviously, you wrote End the Fed a few years ago. The answer, I guess, not too terribly surprising coming from you. But working in a political context like we have, Congressman, who do you think is the most likely nominee right now?
Well, it looks like it's Yellen. I mean, but it's still early. They do a lot of manipulating, pushing back and forth. Last week, it looked like it was Summers, and all of a sudden it shifts. But who knows what will happen the next month or two. But right now, I think the consensus is that she'd probably be nominated.
Yeah. Your son, Senator Rand Paul, said that his pick would be either Hayek or Friedman, which is going to be a tough get.
Well, neither one of them liked the Fed so very much. Friedman wanted to turn it over to a computer, which that's not exactly my position, but it'd probably be better than a few individuals and one in particular behind the scenes in secret pretending they know what interest rates should be. That's to me the most amazing thing, that people accept this. The most important piece of information for investors and for savers is interest rates, and yet we give up on that and decide that it should be controlled by one person. It's positively amazing that the economy tolerates it.
Congressman, the economy, though, is holding up reasonably well. There are better signs lately. Certainly the unemployment rate has come down. That's one reason why we've seen a lot of holdings of gold, for example, take a big hit, holdings which I know your portfolio is overly concentrated in. Has your own wealth taken a hit here over the past year?
Yeah, but I generally look at it long term because, I was looking at the dollar and inflation and gold when we went off the gold standard, totally off the gold standard in 1971. So if you say it took a hit, well, at $35 an ounce and at different things, it doesn't seem so bad, especially if you do it for insurance and long term. And we do know that governments will continue to spend. The deficit problem hasn't been solved, and I'll challenge you on some of the employment statistics. They're not quite as rosy as some people believe. I mean, we're in big trouble, and I challenge people on the inflation factor too. Just think of that little article today in the Times where they said this woman was working 2 jobs and lives in a shelter, which means she can't even get a house because her cost of living is too high. So there's a lot of inflation, a lot of unemployment, and to say that gold went down, in the last year, that doesn't tell you a whole lot. You got to look more long term. You got to look at the basics, and that's what most people don't do. The markets deal with minute to minute. And it can change overnight, or within minutes it can change, and who knows what the next one will be. But I think most people who study free market economics knows that this is very, very fragile. The dollar is fragile, and the statistics don't bear out that we have no inflation. So I think people should be more cautious than overly confident.
Congressman, in the middle of all that fragility, as you describe it, in 2 weeks, every federal agency from the Pentagon to the FBI is due to shut down unless there is a deal by September 30 on the federal budget, and then we have the debt ceiling argument. Speaker Boehner thought that he could get that through without much fuss until yesterday, when 40 conservatives within your party rebelled at a strategy meeting, and now potentially we have a big problem. If you were Speaker Boehner, what would you do?
Well, I would insist that people cut back. Things are going to shut down. The choice is not so much, inflate and spend and borrow and run up the deficits and continue on this path that we are, because the alternative is Detroit. There's nothing that says that many cities, towns, and states and the country could face a Detroit because of the fundamentals. And it's tough because if you want, it's like an addiction. It's pretty hard to talk somebody out of their, out of their addiction and say, oh, well, wean yourself off. It doesn't happen, so they're not going to wean it off. So I would always make